All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being here with me today. I'm your host, Nolan. Lots to get into today. Let's just start off the show by just saying very clearly that the FBI and the DOJ are an absolute disaster. Let's just say that. We're about 1 year in here to this administration, and we can say very clearly from all of the available evidence that we have from investigation after investigation and scandal after scandal that the FBI and the DOJ under Pam Bondi and Kash Patel are absolute disasters. And that's what we'll be focusing on today. We'll start off by talking about the breaking news just as I'm coming on the air today. The DOJ announced that they will not be releasing the entirety of the Epstein files that they have in their possession, just straight up breaking the law that was put in place through the Epstein Files Transparency Act exactly a month ago, which was, of course, the bill that passed through Congress thanks to Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna. So turns out the top law enforcement officer in the country, Pam Bondi, is just going to go ahead and break the law. So we'll talk all about that today and the reaction from the House Democrats who are now looking to prosecute Pam Bondi. Then we'll also later on touch on the latest from the FBI, where we have Dan Bongino announcing his resignation earlier this week, as well as Kash Patel leading an incredibly botched investigation into the Brown University shooter. So we'll talk about all this today and more on the Quest for Clarity podcast.
It is about who we are. It is about what we believe.
They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become.
Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.
Maybe we should improve the liberty of our own country before we seek to do so abroad. Some of us have paid attention to the fact that the expert class, including the foreign policy experts, lie all the time. The correct answer to this, of course, as it always is liberty. All right, everybody, before we begin, if you wouldn't mind going right down below this video and hitting like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate that. Also, if you wouldn't mind going to my Instagram, X, and Spotify accounts and giving all those a follow, I'd really appreciate that as well. Let's get into the big news of the day, which just broke about 15 minutes before I started recording this video, and it's that the DOJ announced, according to Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, they announced that they will not be complying with the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the letter of that law, and they will be withholding a bunch of files that they have in their possession. And this is, again, according to Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. And here is what the New York Times says about this. This was the reporting on it. It says, quote, "The Justice Department will not release all of its files related to Jeffrey Epstein, the financier and convicted sex offender who died in prison by its congressionally mandated deadline by Friday," Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, said. Appearing on Fox News, Mr. Blanche, the deputy's number 2 official, said that while the Trump administration would release, quote, several 100,000 documents related to Mr. Epstein by Friday, officials would make public, quote, several 100,000 more in the coming weeks. Quote, "There's a lot of eyes looking at these, and we want to make sure that when we produce the material we are producing," Mr. Blanche added, "that we are protecting every single victim." So they go through their usual routine, which is what Kash Patel did on Joe Rogan's podcast a couple months back. It's what Pam Bondi's done multiple times, and now Todd Blanche. They go through this routine where they are, just because of the bureaucracy that they are, the DOJ and FBI, they don't want to release everything. They do not want to comply with this law. So what they do is they jump on the victims. They jump on the victims and say, we're hiding all these files, we're redacting all this to protect the victims. Even when all the victims, as we saw with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massie, and Ro Khanna in front of Congress, all the victims that were pressuring this law to pass, they were all saying, release everything. They were saying that they want everything out there. But what the DOJ always does, and very cynically they do this, is that they jump on the victims and they claim to be on the side of the victims because they say we can't release all this stuff because that would hurt the victims. Again, even when the victims themselves say they want everything released. So this is the usual routine they do. It's very corrupt and disgusting. And again, it's completely against the law. You'll remember exactly a month ago, we covered the entire process here on the show. We had Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna for about 6 months almost, ever since the original scandal happened when the DOJ and FBI put out that statement saying there was no more further investigation needed into Jeffrey Epstein. Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna got a discharge petition together and got the necessary 218 votes on the discharge petition, or signatures, I should say, to force a vote on the House floor on this Epstein Files Transparency Act, which does require that the DOJ release every single unclassified file in their possession as it pertains to Jeffrey Epstein. And this passed exactly 1 month ago and gave them 30 days. The DOJ had to gather all their stuff and release it. And today is Epstein file release day. So everyone's sitting here waiting around for these files to be released. And then just about 15 minutes ago, we get word from Todd Blanche that actually we're going to release some, but we're gonna hold back hundreds of thousands more for the coming weeks. Now, keep in mind, the coming weeks are Congress's holiday break. Congress actually went on break 1 day early. They just went on break today. And largely, most likely because of this, because they probably knew, Mike Johnson probably knew this was coming, and they are sending Congress to break 1 day early, so that most likely so that House Democrats can't go ahead with seeking to prosecute Pam Bondi for this, which is what they're saying they're looking to do now.
Let me be very clear. We need a full release. Anyone who tampers with these documents or conceals documents or engages in excessive redaction will be prosecuted because of obstruction of justice. We will prosecute individuals regardless of whether they're the Attorney General or a career or political appointee. We need full transparency and justice for the survivors.
There's nothing that's subject to interpretation. We're not arguing whether this law is valid. We're not arguing the case history of this law is interpreted by the Supreme Court. This is a fresh law that was passed unanimously in the Senate, passed 427 to 1 in the House, with modern terms that are not ambiguous, that federal judges have already demonstrated that they understand and that they are going to comply with. And this president, he's agreed to comply with this law if he signed this law. He had a part in making this the law, so his Attorney General has to comply with it. And there are penalties if she does not.
This was the official statement from the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee, and this is an article from The Independent. It says, quote, Donald Trump and the Department of Justice are now violating federal law as they continue covering up the facts and the evidence about Jeffrey Epstein's decades-long billion-dollar international sex trafficking ring, ranking members of the committee said Friday afternoon. So that was a statement from the House Oversight Democrats. And again, if this doesn't prove, and this is a common theme here with all this government corruption, all the DOJ corruption, mainly corruption from the executive branch, if this doesn't prove that the Constitution is broken at this point, that anyone who's saying that they're following the Constitution is just lying to you at this point, then I don't know what will. Because think about, in theory, what is the House of Representatives actually supposed to be? It's supposed to be all of these people in the House of Representatives, all of these members are supposed to represent the wishes of their constituents. And their votes, theoretically, again, this isn't how it always goes, but in theory, the votes from these members of the House of Representatives on legislation is supposed to represent the wishes of their constituents. So, in theory, these guys are supposed to represent the people. So, if we follow that logic, and the House of Representatives, I believe it was 434 to 1 or something, voted to have all the Epstein files released, the vast majority of the people of this country in polling data want the vast majority of these files released. But a bureaucratic system in the Department of Justice decides, actually, no, we're going to go against what the majority of the people of this country want. We're going to go against Congress. We're going to go against the House and the Senate and not release anything that the people are saying they want released. If that doesn't show you that this government is completely illegitimate, then I don't know what does. Because the whole point of this government is of, by, and for the people. And if the government acts as an entirely separate entity than the people, if they act in their own self-interests, which really is what the state is an entirely separate group of people, separate from the people of this country. They are all individuals with their own individual self-interest, acting in those interests, not on behalf of you. Then how can it be considered legitimate? How can their authority, which they claim to have as the leaders of this country, with the power over you, the power to prosecute you. How can that authority be legitimate when they don't even hold up their end of the bargain, which is supposed to be that they represent the wishes of the American people? How can that be at all legitimate? And obviously it's not. And this just shows, again, I mean, as I said in the beginning of this episode, the FBI and the DOJ are just complete clown shows. They're absolute disasters. And we've seen this time and time again just this year. We've gone through the timeline a bunch, so I won't bore you again with all the details. But this whole Epstein debacle started off when we had these people, and we put them in place. We had Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino, 1 and 2 at the FBI, and then the Attorney General, who were put in place specifically for the purpose of tearing this thing down, getting to the bottom of all these scandals that we've been wanting to get answers to for years. They were put in place to do that. And we now, back in it was either June or July when that letter came out, that saying there's no further investigation needed into Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, these are the people, if you remember, that were going on podcast after podcast, making this very known. Kash Patel said he saw the evidence that would shock you. Dan Bongino said he had insider information into Jeffrey Epstein's ties to a country in the Middle East. And of course, if you've been watching these episodes here recently, you know which country he was probably talking about, because Jeffrey Epstein was friends with that country's prime ministers, and he had ties to that country's intelligence. So when these people are put in place, these people who are supposed to be the truth seekers, these people are supposed to represent the base. Like, this is the core of the base. The Dan Bonginos and the Kash Patels really are the core of the MAGA base, the people who want to get to the bottom of this, who've made repeated podcast appearances and speeches specifically about the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, saying they want to get to the bottom of it. When those people get in power, and the minute they get power, they start going on interviews on Fox News acting like robots and saying there's nothing to see here. He killed himself. There were no clients. And actually, everyone who's ever said there was clients and anyone who ever said there was evidence of a conspiracy, actually, you're crazy. And then Dan Bongino goes on this whole sympathy tour where he's looking for us to all feel bad for him, where he says this ridiculous line that he gets there at 7:30 or whatever. Like, as if we're supposed to feel bad for that. The American people are supposed to feel bad for the deputy director of the FBI because he has to show up at the office at 7:30. And he made this whole spectacle on Fox News that he's divorced from his wife. Well, not really, but theoretically, because he spends the day at work away from her. Like, these guys are out there trying to get sympathy from the American people for covering up the scandal that the American people put them in place to solve. It's insane. And now here's the latest layer of that, which is that even when Congress creates and the president signs a law saying that the DOJ legally is required to release every file in their possession about this, even when that happens, even when we go through the complete legal process, like the right way, the constitutional way of doing this, ordering the DOJ by Congress to release everything, even when that's done, we still can't get answers. We still have like cronies like Todd Blanche on Fox News saying, we actually have to wait a couple weeks. We actually can't release everything now. They've had a month. If you don't think they've been preparing this for months, then you have no idea what's going on, because they've had a month to prepare this. And if the idea is really that they expect us to believe that they need a couple more weeks to finish gathering these documents, they must think you're all incredibly stupid, because that's not the case. We had the report last night. This was, people were preparing for this yesterday because this was the big release day. Reports last night from CNN, from their sources inside the FBI, said that lawyers, thousands of lawyers, were rapidly redacting everything they could with these files. They have a team of corporate bureaucratic lawyers in the DOJ actively working against the people of this country that are trying to cover up this entire scandal while pretending to be transparent. You hear this line repeated over and over and over: the most transparent administration in history, while they actively have all these corrupt lawyers sitting in the DOJ right now, covering up everything they possibly can in these files, so that the American people who have demanded transparency, both through polls, through outrage publicly, and through the Congress, so those people cannot get any evidence of this whole corrupt system. They're trying to cover up everything they possibly can. And all you can say about that is the government doesn't work for you. They work for themselves. And they're entirely illegitimate. And all these all these corrupt systems, the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, all of it, if we're to return to some sort of legitimate government, needs to be completely figuratively torn down and downsized like 90%. Because we can't have a system where the law enforcement branch of the government is actively obstructing justice to avoid giving transparency to its citizens. It's actively working against you. The law enforcement of this country is actively working against the wishes of the people that it's supposed to represent. That a system like that cannot continue. So that's the latest with the Epstein Files debacle. And we're not done yet. As I said about Dan Bongino, he did announce his resignation just the other day. And we'll read directly from his tweet about this. He says, quote, "I will be leaving my position with the FBI in January. I want to thank President Trump, Attorney General Bondi, and Director Patel for the opportunity to serve with purpose. Most importantly, I want to thank you, my fellow Americans, for the privilege to serve you. God bless America and all those who defend her." So, of course, this raises questions. Why is Dan Bongino leaving the FBI? And the most obvious reason that it probably is that he's probably sick of this thankless job, that all it's getting him is the destruction of his reputation, and he's making significantly less money than he did before on his podcast. And why would he continue this? His reputation is gone. If we think about Dan Bongino here, his reputation has gone from like one of the top 3 really podcasts in the conservative movement. He was one of the top figures that was like, he made his image, Dan Bongino did. Just remember this. And this is why it's so ridiculous that his career has gone down the tubes like it has. Dan Bongino made his entire image within the Trump movement going after 2 main scandals. It was Jeffrey Epstein. It was, as many people tried to tell you otherwise, his 2 big issues were Jeffrey Epstein scandal and Russiagate. And if we check in on the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, we don't even have to get back into it. We just went over how all of this is entirely corrupt, and he's been a part of it now, which is upsetting, but it's true. He's been involved in a cover-up. And in terms of Russiagate, how is the prosecution of James Comey going? Oh yeah, it's done. The Attorney General and the FBI completely failed in their prosecution of James Comey. They haven't even tried with Brennan. We had Tulsi Gabbard back in the summer saying that she had evidence that Obama committed treason, and not one effort to prosecute Barack Obama. So even if you want to say that he was good on Russiagate, where's the rest of the team? Because there seems to be no interest in having a legitimate prosecution of James Comey for the crimes he did commit. There was no interest in that. Instead, they threw up this flimsy prosecutor that wasn't even correctly appointed. And they put up this incredibly weak case, and it got knocked down instantly by a court. That was James Comey. We haven't even tried with John Brennan, and we haven't even tried with Barack Obama. Even through all the talk, we were talking so much that Obama was forced to put out a statement about this. He was actually somewhat concerned that he was maybe prosecuted, and then not a peep since the summer about this. If we have evidence that Obama committed treason, where is the prosecution? So this entire FBI is just a disgrace. It's a joke. And I think Dan Bongino realizes that it's a sinking ship and he's trying to get off the ship. So we'll see what he does in his final days. I'm sure it won't be anything significant, but we'll see what he does after. I'm sure he'll be he'll have NDAs through the roof, and he won't be able to say what's really going on the inside. But we'll see if he ever discloses what actually went down between him and Pam Bondi, who supposedly had a very bad relationship. Apparently he was very mad at Pam Bondi for her handling of the Epstein scandal. So I think he knows what's going on here. I think he knows that this is not good for his reputation, and that's probably why he's announcing his resignation. And maybe it has something to do with he knew this was coming. Actually, that also is a possible scenario. Maybe he knew that this current cover-up, which is now continued into not releasing any files on the release day, maybe he knew this was coming, and he wants to get out of the way. So that might also be what's happening. And we'll end off today by discussing, as we have been this entire episode, the incompetency of Kash Patel and the FBI. So, we haven't covered it here on the show, really, but for those, I'm sure you've seen all the news about this. There was a major shooting over the weekend at Brown University, and the shooter completely got away. And it was this massive manhunt through New England, this massive scandal. And it was just these press conferences. Anyone who's seen any of the clips from these press conferences with the Providence mayor and the governor of Rhode Island and the Brown University president, it's an absolute clown show. They're all the most incompetent people ever in their roles. They have no answers to any of the questions of how did they not, with all the cameras on Brown University, all the cameras around this mass surveillance system that we have in this country. How is it possible that this guy, who by the videos we do have, was not the thinnest guy, like this guy couldn't have just got away? How is it possible that this guy literally fled and they found him dead yesterday in New Hampshire? How is he allowed to get from Brown University to New Hampshire completely unseen without any lead from the FBI? And and how they found him, as crazy as it is a Reddit user found him. A Reddit user gave the police a tip. Here is the NBC News article about this. It says, quote, having unleashed a multi-agency manhunt involving the Providence Police, the FBI, and a $50,000 reward, the clue investigators needed was in the Brown University shooting was ultimately found not in a street corner, but in a Reddit thread. Online tipsters have had a mixed record when it comes to providing information about mass casualty incidents, but Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Norena said this Reddit user, quote, blew the case wide open after posting about their encounter on Saturday with the suspect. Quote, I'm being dead serious, wrote the Reddit user, identified in an affidavit as John, 3 days after the shooting at Brown. Quote, the police need to look into a gray Nissan with Florida plates, possibly a rental. The police interviews that followed, the Reddit user said that he had bumped into the suspect in a bathroom inside the Boris Hawley building at Brown and noticed his clothes were, quote, inappropriate and inadequate for the December New England weather. The affidavit said John followed the suspect around outside, leading to a, quote, game of cat and mouse that ended in the suspect confronting him and asked, why are you harassing me? So, Kash Patel's FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, required this Reddit user to find their guy in this mass casualty event. This, by the way, in this time span of like almost a week where they couldn't find the shooter, this guy went on, and now they're saying he went on to allegedly be the person responsible for the shooting or the murder of the MIT professor in Boston. They're saying that this guy was allowed to escape from Rhode Island, from Brown University, up to Boston, to the MIT professor's house outside of Boston, kill him, who, by the way, was like a leading nuclear scientist, so that's strange, who apparently, according to internet sleuths who looked into this guy's background, had connections to the shooter, so it looks like they may have known each other from back in Portugal in the 90s, and then also at Brown University in the early 2000s, so it seems like they may have known each other. So he had time while the FBI is doing ridiculous activities in the snow. And that's true, by the way. The FBI was kicking the snow on Brown University's campus as this guy was making his big escape. They were kicking the snow. While the FBI was busy kicking the snow, looking for whatever evidence they thought they were going to find in the less than a half an inch of snow, this guy made his way up and had another murder at MIT and then made his way to New Hampshire. So Kash Patel... where is Kash Patel? You might be asking, where is Kash Patel during all this? You might think he should be out there during this massive national manhunt for this killer. You think Kash Patel would be like out and about, like making every piece of information known, the most transparent administration in history. He'd be out at every press conference, giving the information that we have available. No, Kash Patel is sitting somewhere else in the FBI building, while Katie Miller is posting this podcast, which she says was previously recorded on Sunday before the shooting happened. Katie Miller, in the worst PR move I think I've ever seen, releases a podcast with Kash Patel and his girlfriend and redirects all the attention to how ridiculously incompetent Kash Patel is. And for those who've been following this stupid drama, this is really online. It's a really online drama. Kash Patel's girlfriend, he's been taking the FBI official jet for personal use to go see his girlfriend's concerts. It's the dumbest thing you would ever look at. It's the dumbest thing you'd ever read. And this has been a really online scandal. It's become way too loud. Like, there's too many people who know about this. And it shouldn't even be the idea that Kash Patel's girlfriend is in the news at all is just an absurdity. this guy, this public figure, this lead, like, pretty much the number 2 law enforcement officer in the country underneath Pam Bondi. The idea that his girlfriend scandal is making the news, and he's actually taking time out of his day to go on Katie Miller's podcast and address his girlfriend scandal. It's, while a Brown University shooter is on the loose, I mean, it's so ridiculous. This is like a fireable offense. It's like number 10,000 from Kash Patel during this administration. I don't know how Pam Bondi, I don't know how Kash Patel, I don't know how, I mean, we can go down the list of everyone in the administration. I don't know how Mike Huckabee, I don't know how any of these guys, Mike Waltz, these guys should be fired. If you remember the first Trump term, we had massive layoffs over and over and over. It was like mass firings pretty much every couple months. These guys in major positions were being rotated out. And we can go firing by firing back there and see what was right and what was wrong. But the point is, there was massive turnover in the first administration. And for some reason, everyone here is sticking around. Despite their incompetencies, despite the scandals, despite the debacles, like letting a shooter go for a week. And they just don't get fired. And by the way, this is very much similar to, we forget about this, but back in September during the Charlie Kirk shooting investigation, they let Tyler Robinson, the alleged shooter, they let him get away for like a week. They couldn't find him for days until the FBI didn't even find him. The parents of Tyler Robinson turned him in to the police. So the FBI now has 2 massive events, massive shootings, these high-profile events where they didn't even get to the bottom of the investigation. It relied on community, on the community getting to the bottom of this, the internet sleuths getting to the bottom of it, the parents of the shooters turning them in, the random guys on Reddit who saw him on the sidewalk turning him in. It's crazy. And meanwhile, the FBI are all in their stupid bomber jackets at Brown University's campus kicking the snow like that's going to find the shooter. And you have the Providence mayor and the Brown University president saying it's safe to go outside while the FBI has no idea what this dangerous individual is. And I saw someone make this point just yesterday before they found the shooter. It's like we have this entire mass surveillance system after the Patriot Act, after all the NSA spying was exposed. It never stopped. We have this massive surveillance system in this country with cameras literally everywhere. Like in New York City, you can see every inch of the city through these cameras that the government has access to. You have cities in this country, New York City, like with partnerships with Microsoft in these mass surveillance projects for the purpose of watching the citizens. And you would think with that, as unjust and as insane and criminal as that is, you would think that maybe one potential upside of that is that we'd find justice and that we could actually like solve these massive events, these massive crimes, these mass shootings. You would think that maybe that would be a potential upside of that. But actually, no, we have all the downsides of invasion of privacy and obstruction and like full-blown unconstitutional activity from our national security our national security apparatus, with none of the upsides of maybe we can solve some of these crimes quicker with all the cameras that we have in this country. So that's where we'll end it off for today. The DOJ and FBI need to be, the Attorney General needs to go. Kash Patel needs to go. Dan Bongino is going. And these agencies need to be completely flipped on their head because there's nothing redeemable at this point with these agencies. I mean, it's unbelievable. But that's where we'll end it off for today. Please be sure to go down below and like and subscribe, guys. Please be sure to go to my Instagram, X, and Spotify accounts and give all those a follow. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Have a good day.
It is about who we are. It is about what we believe.
They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become.
Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.